Hi, it's Jamel Lane with Scrapbook Remix, and today we are talking all about scrapping with scraps. So that always seems a little strange to say or write, but the idea is we're not using any full sheets. Everything that I'm using on this particular page was in some way left over. So you can start to see I was scrapbooking with some kits, and so you can see everything there at the side. Anything that's on the table aside from tools is part of a kit. So I have offcuts of pattern paper at this point. You can see my letter stickers are over to the side, and they're kind of starting to get picked over where I have some letters, enough to still spell things, but there's some big gaps in there too. So looking just at ways to use leftovers and all the bits and pieces that we end up with, all those partial sheets, but not have the page necessarily scream, oh, we've only used small scraps of paper. Not that that's really a bad thing, but that I know it can provide a different look. And one of the things I try to do within an album is keep some sort of continuity so that my style is consistent enough as you go through that things will seem as though they were all created to be together. It doesn't mean that it has to be all exactly the same supplies. And I think because when we started doing albums with a theme, a lot of people instantly started saying, oh, I'm going to use the same supplies from start to finish. And with a smaller album, that works really well. Or if you're going to do a set of pages all at one time. So say you decided, oh, I'm going to make an album about last summer, and I'm going to take all my photos from last summer and I'm going to go away to a crop for the weekend and I'm just going to work on that. Then that's a great opportunity to take one set of supplies, take enough that it's going to fill your whole album, but you wouldn't need anything else. You wouldn't be then working in completely different supplies. And in my ordinary albums, because I'm not creating them all at one time, I'm not creating them all in one weekend, and I'm not creating them all with one kit, all of my just average ordinary 12 by 12 pages tend to come from this idea of today I want to scrapbook this, or so those photos, or I start with a certain set of products and say, okay, I want to use this paper. What photos do I have to go with that? So one way or the other, I'm either picking the photos and the story first and then finding the paper to go with it, or I'm starting with the paper and then finding the photos to go with it. And I do tend to mix it up. But within my albums, even though the supplies are going to be completely different on every page, I still want it to look like it's all meant to go together. So I do that not just by not by creating everything with the same supplies, but by using the same sorts of techniques over and over again. And I do have within my supplies, there are certain elements that will repeat. So you may notice I use a lot of wood grain. I don't use a lot of solid colored backgrounds, but when I do, they tend to be in the same color range. So I use craft, white, gray, black, and that's pretty much it. When I get back into my older pages, I do have a bit more color in the cardstock, but once there was pattern paper available in a wider range of different patterns and textures and things like that, then I started using that. So on this page, which at the moment you'll see I am spelling upside down incorrectly, and I promise you in just a moment I learn how to spell the word love and fix that. Just sometimes when I scrapbook upside down I'm fine, and sometimes I make really stupid mistakes like that. Anyway, with the layout, I started with that strip that goes almost all the way across the page, and cheating the 12 inches and leaving that little bit of border of cardstock that goes on either side, so that piece across the middle is more like 11.5 or 11 and a bit. That's one great way to be able to use scraps and not have it be obvious that some pieces are smaller, because when you start by saying I'm going to keep the cardstock frame all the way around the page, you instantly only need smaller pieces. You don't have to have anything that's going to have a full 12-inch width or height. So that's one trick to start, is take a larger piece, but don't make it the 12-inch width. Go ahead and have it floating and centered on the page. Another is to look at the photo size. Because I'm using small pieces of paper, I'm using small photos. And it's certainly not the only way. You could certainly use big photos, in fact, and not need many bits of paper. But if you want to have a lot of impact and still have multiple photos, but without any large pieces of paper, small photos are one way that really makes that work. Then adding some texture color to the background is another thing that will really help, because I don't need lots of pieces of paper if I have some ink or some stamping in the background that carries my pattern bigger than the pieces that I'm including. So on this page, there's both stamping here at the bottom and there's some mist up at the top. So adding that little extra bit of pattern doesn't require any paper, and I think sometimes we all need a little reminder to use the different tools like stamps that we've invested in. I know that sometimes I tend to leave mine on the shelf and then remember and go through a bit of a whirlwind of stamping on everything for a few weeks to kind of make up for it. And then here's a second look. I wanted to take you through the fact that it's the same sort of pointers. So again, there's mist on the background. Again, the paper doesn't go all the way across the 12-inch width. It doesn't even go 11 at this point because I didn't have that large of a paper scrap to go all the way across or near. So I lengthened that or widened that box by adding the washi tape across the page. It's a small photo. And this was one last little thing I wanted to include, was that you can have this sort of style where you have just one portion of the page with everything grouped there together, and then take another part of the page and do another very small grouping, and then fill the gap. That gap will be a great place to put your writing so that you can include your journaling, and you don't need a separate journaling card or anything like that. It will pull together the design, and you'll have two sections. You'll have one very small embellishment area and then another part of the page where you have your photo, your title, some embellishment, all that together. And then your handwriting will bridge the gap between the two. Or if you're not into handwriting it at all, plan it out a little bit ahead of time, and if your printer allows, you can print right on the background cardstock. It depends on if you have a printer that would allow you to print 12 by 12. I don't, but if I was using a printer for my journaling, then I probably would. So things to remember with scraps. Try to leave a frame of the background all the way around. Try something like mist or stamping on the bottom layer to extend the design wider than the papers. And look at ways that you can include embellishment on separate parts of the page so that it doesn't require so much, because you can fill the gap with your journaling and not need a whole nother element of paper. So if you look at this layout, the writing's going to appear in that gap, and that'll be sort of an inverted L shape. And if I'd done this with paper, I would need another large piece of paper to fill that gap, and probably more than one, because I've already started with so many layers. So it would take quite a bit more to fill that gap there. But by filling it with my writing, I don't need any more supplies. So I hope you enjoy this video and the prompt, and happy scrapping with all those scraps.